Hello everyone, welcome to this session of Environment and Ecology. A very good evening to all of you. So today we are looking into the 11th lecture in this series for Upsc Cse, and we have completed the first portion, environment. We have finished in the last class. In the first 10 lectures, we have completed the environment portion. So from here onwards, we are doing the ecology one, and we are starting with the topic biodiversity. Okay, so welcome to Madhav Sankar classes. If you are new here, please make sure to subscribe to my channel so that you will get all the updates. Also, please make sure to like this video and share with your friends so that other aspirants can also benefit from this. Okay, so once again, I welcome all of you to this session. And without any further ado, let's begin. Okay, so today we are looking into two core areas. One is biodiversity and the second one is biodiversity as far as India is concerned. All right, so first of all, in general, what exactly is biodiversity? According to the United Nations Earth Summit, the very famous Rio Summit, which happened in 1992, biodiversity is defined as the variability among living organisms from all sources, including terrestrial, marine, and other aquatic ecosystems, and the ecological complexes of which they are a part. This includes diversity within species, between species, and of ecosystems. So this is the very broad definition of biodiversity given by the Rio Summit, okay, which happened in 1992. All right, so basically what it says is it includes literally everything. It includes terrestrial, marine, and other aquatic ecosystems. It also includes diversity within species, between species, and diversity of different kinds of environments. All this is together termed as biodiversity. Okay, so now let's look at what are the different levels of biodiversity. Biodiversity is actually of three different levels. Genetic diversity, which in the name itself, you know what genetics is. So within the genes, okay, there are variations. So that is genetic diversity. Then species diversity, diversity between the species. And then ecosystem or community diversity, which is the biggest one, the bigger picture. So let's take one by one. Genetic diversity. So again, as the term suggests, it is the variation in the genes of a particular species. Okay, so within a single species itself, there are variations in the genes. Correct. Consider human beings, Homo sapiens. We are all belonging to the same species, but huge diversity. Correct. There are people with different kinds of traits and attributes and etc. etc. because of genes. So allows species to adapt to changing environments. Also correct. There are human beings living in the tropical region. There are people living in the temperates. There are people living in the Arctic region. Correct. So based on the environment, this genetic diversity helps to adapt. Clear? So while genetic diversity, brings in more and more, differences within the same species, it also helps to survive the same species through the same genes. Okay, if you take a linear, descendancy from father to son to, grandson, etc., etc., similar kind of gene is passed through them. Correct. So in a way, it protects us, that chain, and in another way, it brings in more and more diversity. Got it? So that is the peculiarity of genetic diversity. It is both diverse and it is unique. Clear? Now, species diversity basically refers to the variety of living organisms on Earth. Correct. It is the ratio of one species population over total number of organisms across all species in a given biome. So basically it is, ratio of one species population. Okay. Divided by total number of organisms across all species. So this is the species diversity. This is the equation of species diversity. So If the value is 0, it means that we have infinite diversity. Okay, and if the value of this is 1, then it represents that there is only one species present. Clear? So if this is 0, there are infinite number of species. If this is 1, it means only one species is existing. Correct, minimum diversity. Finally, last one, ecosystem or community diversity. So again, here also, as the name suggests, it refers to the diversity in habitats. There are different kinds of habitats, right? Deserts are there, mountainscapes are there, grasslands are there. Correct? Even micro habitats are there. So huge variety of ecosystems or minor habitats. So this is also very, very important because changes in ecosystem or habitat can bring in a lot of changes to the organisms that live within it. Correct? Climatic factors and other ecological factors can bring in huge changes in the animals and plants that live in that area, which again infuses more and more diversity. So these are the 3 levels of biodiversity that exists: genetic diversity in the genes, species diversity between and within species, and finally ecosystem diversity or community diversity. Okay, now measurement of biodiversity. How do we measure biodiversity? Biodiversity is actually measured in 2 prominent topics: species richness and species evenness. Okay, so what is the species richness and what is species evenness? Species richness means it is the measure of number of species found in a community. So if there is a community, okay, in a given area, I hope you remember what a community is. Okay, I have taken it in the first class. All right, so within a community, how many number of species are there? This is the species richness. Okay, so for example, in a rainforest, the species richness is very, very, very high. In an equatorial rainforest, huge number of species. Even if you take a small community, you can find innumerous number of species. But consider a desert. There, if you take a small community, the richness is not that much. Correct? Relatively very, very, very few. Got it. So even the species richness can be subcategorized into 3: alpha diversity, beta diversity, and gamma diversity. So alpha diversity means diversity within a particular area or ecosystem. Okay, if you are taking a particular area or say a particular ecosystem, and if you are looking into it, how many number of species are there? This basically denotes alpha diversity. Okay, so basically species richness in that area. Beta diversity means it is a comparison of diversity between ecosystems. Okay, take 2 ecosystems and compare these 2 ecosystems based on species richness. This will give you beta diversity. Just as I mentioned earlier, rainforest, desert, compare these 2. Okay, so this comparison, this is what beta diversity implies. Third one, gamma diversity. This is a measure of all diversity for the different ecosystems within a region. It's a much, much, much bigger picture. Measure of overall diversity of different ecosystems in a given region. Correct? So this is known as gamma diversity. So again, to make it more clear, let me draw a diagram. So in alpha diversity, if this is an ecosystem, okay, this is one ecosystem, E1. So within there are plenty of species. Correct? So this diversity is termed as alpha diversity. Now, if there are 2 ecosystems, okay, with some species in both of them, comparison between E1 and E2, these 2 different ecosystems or communities, this is known as beta diversity. And if there are multiple ecosystems, E3, E4, E5, okay, all these are there in a particular region. This evaluation is known as gamma diversity. Understood? This is the 3 types of species richness: alpha, beta, and gamma. Now, species evenness. What exactly is species evenness? Again, just as the name suggests, It measures the proportion of a species at a given site. Proportion of a species at a given site. So low evenness indicates that a few species dominate the site. Correct? Consider a city. Okay, say Mumbai or say Delhi or Trivandrum or any city. In a city, if you look at species evenness, you would see that human beings or Homo sapiens are occupying a huge crux. 98% or say like 90% of the entire species is human beings. Correct? Only some animals and birds can be seen in these cities. So this means that evenness is low, which means one particular species is dominating that region or a few number of species are dominating that region. But consider a rainforest. There, the evenness is very, very less. You can see all kinds of trees, all kinds of animals, insects, etc., etc. So the evenness is much, much, much more seen in a forest region compared to, say, a city or such other regions. Got it? So that is the meaning of species evenness. Now, another very simple topic: services provided by biodiversity. So we looked into what is biodiversity, the levels of biodiversity. Okay, so what exactly do this biodiversity do? What are the advantages of biodiversity? It provides us with a lot of services, which can broadly be classified into three: ecosystem services, biological services, social services. Okay, so what could be these services? You can write this on your own. Okay, what are ecosystem services provided by biodiversity? Protection of water resources, soil formation, nutrient storage and recycling, pollution breakdown and absorption, climate stability, maintenance of ecosystems, recovery from unpredictable events. Correct, we have looked into all these in our previous classes. These are the ecosystem services provided by biodiversity or provided by nature. Correct. What are the biological services? Food, medicinal resources, wood products, ornamental plants, breeding of stocks, diversity in genes, species, and ecosystems. So, in a biological perspective, what are its advantages or what are the contributions of biodiversity? Again, very much, you can write this on your own. Social services. What are these? Research, education, recreation, tourism, cultural values. Correct. So these are the, broadly, these are the services provided by biodiversity. All right. I mean, these points are, in order to give some substance to your main answers. All right. Possibly you can use all these in your essays in case you get a question that is based on biodiversity or say ecology. All right. Now, despite having all these positive advantages, even then, our biodiversity is facing a lot of threats. Okay, we are facing a huge biodiversity loss. Broadly, there are two causes for this. One is natural and the other one is man-made. So the natural causes includes all the natural disasters, floods, earthquakes, landslides, etc., etc., etc. Diseases, rivalry among species. Okay, man-made causes includes, habitation destruction, destruction of, wetlands for agricultural purposes, industrialization, pollution, hunting. Got it? So these are the man-made causes. So because of all these causes, biodiversity is undergoing considerable reduction. Okay, so this brings us to the need to conserve biodiversity. Before everything goes berserk, it is necessary to bring back that stability or at least maintain the existing scenario. Okay, so various conservation measures have to be adopted. There are two ways in which conservation could be achieved. One is ex situ conservation, other one is in situ. What is ex situ and what is in situ? Ex situ means conserving the biodiversity outside the area where they naturally occur. We have studied this in earlier classes. Okay, ex situ means the conservation is done somewhere else, not in the site. Off-site conservation. Okay, that is basically ex situ conservation. Examples: zoological parks, botanical gardens. Correct. In zoological parks, what happened? Animals are taken from the forests, which are their natural habitats. They are held as captives. Okay, and they are taken care of well. And once their population comes, starts to grow, they are taken back to the natural environment. Same goes for botanical gardens. We preserve a lot of plants and breed them more and more in a protected environment. So these are the examples of ex situ conservation. Other examples include seed banks, botanical, horticultural and recreational gardens, etc. etc. Got it? Now, in situ form. In situ means on-site. Conservation in their own natural habitat. This is in situ conservation. This includes national parks, sanctuaries, biosphere reserves, reserved forests, protected forests, etc. 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 So we are basically giving protection to these species within their own natural habitat. Got it? So what are the constraints that we face while doing all these kinds of protection? There are certain limitations or there are certain inhibitions which prevents us from giving 100 the full potential of conservation. What are these constraints? First of all, low priority. Okay, environment and ecology are always given low priority compared to everything else. When we speak about protecting animals, we keep that in a low priority compared to other things. Mostly the only species that we are concerned about protecting is human beings. Correct? As for human beings, we have all kinds of laws and everything in place. But for animals, we do not give that kind of protection. We always see them as secondary with low priority. Exploitation, inadequate knowledge, unplanned urbanization, over industrialization or uncontrolled industrialization. Correct. So these are the major constraints regarding biodiversity conservation. Okay, so earlier we talked about botanical gardens and zoos, which are best examples of ex situ conservations. So just some more about these. What exactly is a botanical garden? Botanical garden is basically a scientifically planned collection of living trees, shrubs, herbs, climbers, and other plants from various parts of the world. That's it. You are collecting all these things from various parts of the world and bringing it together and giving adequate protection to these species. This is known as a botanical garden. What are the functions of a botanical garden? What is the purpose? Broadly, we can say as follows. To study the taxonomy as well as the growth of plants. Basically, taxonomy, basic structure and growth of plants. That's it. Study the interaction and acclimatization process of exotic plants. When they are brought into from different parts of the world, we have to study how do they adapt. Okay, what are their characteristics? Similarly, it acts as a germ plasm collection. Also correct. We can, interbreed. We can also extract genetic material, etc., and create much more of them. We can introduce genetic diversity, genetic modification. Okay, so it acts as a germ plasm collection. Correct. Think about it. If we have one particular species, some prototype, or say some if we have collected a particular species from a particular area, and if that species has become extinct everywhere else in the world, we have the germplasm of that species in the garden, botanical garden. So we can actually cultivate it more and more, and then we can reintroduce them into the wild. Correct? So this helps us to prevent species extinction. All right. Now, it helps development of new hybrids. Yes, we can crossbreed them, interbreed them. Okay, cross-pollination, etc., helps in creating new hybrids. It augments conserving rare and threatened species. Also correct. Those species which are facing endangerment or threats from the in their natural habitats can be actually protected in a botanical garden. Zoo is again the same thing. initially when zoos were originally planned, they were actually more of a say a showcase area for people to come and watch the animals and etc etc. Okay, but now the zoos are much more than that. It is not just a showcase area for animals. It is more of conserving these animals. All right, zoos. If you remember the old zoos and all, animals are kept in cages made of iron. Correct. Iron grills are there, and we can see the tigers and lions within these cages. These were actually cruelty to animals. But now, if you go to a zoo, you can actually see the same animals, but not in cages and all, but in much more, a realistic environment. You can actually see a huge area, a park-like area where you can see the tigers and lions, etc., simply roaming around. Correct. So the zoos have actually evolved from what it was a long time ago. But according to the Central Zoo Authority, CZA, zoos are areas where captive animals are kept for exhibition to the public and includes a circus and rescue centers, but does not include an establishment of a licensed dealer in captive animals. So basically, a circus, rescue centers, etc., all comes under the wide topic of a zoo. But if a licensed dealer is actually keeping some captive animals, that does not qualify as a zoo. Everything else comes under the broader explanation of a zoo. Okay, so when we talk about this, endangerment, threaten, etc., one of the most important things that come to our mind is the Red Data book. The book that classifies these different animals and plants based on their availability, or based on how their position is in an environment or in the world. Correct? Some are classified as critically endangered, some are classified as endangered, some are classified as vulnerable. Correct? So all these classifications are actually done by International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, or IUCN. IUCN is the agency that publishes Red Data book. IUCN is actually located in Morges in Switzerland. Okay, and the first issue came out in 1966, and this is actually by the IUCN's Special Survival Commission. Clear? So this report actually included information for endangered mammals and birds, and more extensive than for other groups of animals and plants. Coverage is also given to less prominent organisms facing extinction. Clear? So more importance is actually it focuses on those species of animals and plants which are at high risk of extinction. Okay, and accordingly, their position is kept in the Red Data book. Based on the color, we can identify the level of threat a particular animal or a plant faces in the nature. The pink pages in this publication include the critically endangered species. Okay, the species that face the highest level of threat are put in the critically endangered category, and this category is actually colored with pink color. Green pages are used for those species that were formerly endangered but have now recovered to a point where they are no longer threatened. Earlier they were endangered, but now they have finally, due to the human efforts and all, they are now much better in number and no longer threatened. Such species are put in green pages. Okay, so Red Data book have a color coding. Pink is for critically endangered, and green is for those that manage to come out of any sort of danger. All right. So now let's look at individual classifications under the Red Data book. Okay, sorry, this is IUCN classification of the based on conservation priority, etc., etc. We have multiple classifications starting with extinct and then all the way down to low concern, etc., etc. We will look into that one by one. Starting with extinct. What does extinct means? A taxon is extinct when there is no reasonable doubt that the last individual has died. For example, dodo bird. You have heard about dodo, correct? Similarly, mammoth. We are 100% sure that every last single one of these species are dead. Nothing is alive in the world. If we are sure about that, they are kept under the category extinct. But there is another subcategory for this that is known as presumed extinct. Presumed extinct. This means that, we have conducted exhaustive surveys and all, etc. in their expected habitats, but we were not able to find even a single individual. Okay, we conducted all these surveys, but we couldn't find any individual from this species. But we are not 100% sure if they are completely gone. Okay, so such animals are kept, such species are kept in extinct, the presumed extinct category. The second major classification is extinct in wild, EW. What does this mean? This means that this animal cannot be seen in their natural habitat anymore. This species can only be seen in certain, in captivity, basically in ex situ methods of conservation. We can see them in zoo, we can see them in botanical gardens, but we cannot find them anywhere in the natural habitat. Clear? Here also we have something called presumed extinct in the wild. Same explanation. We conducted extension, exhaustive surveys and all. We cannot find a single animal or plant in its natural habitat, but they are still there in captive breeding. Okay, so in such a scenario, that species is kept under presumed extinct in the wild category. The next category is critically endangered. Critically endangered means a taxon is critically endangered when the best available evidence indicates that it meets any of the criteria for critically endangered. So what are the criteria to put a species in the CR category? First of all, reduction in population that is greater than 90% over the last 10 years. In the past decade, if the number of that species, if the population of that species has reduced over 90%, then it qualifies as critically endangered. Population size is less than 50 mature individuals. Quantitative analysis showing the probability of extinction in the wild in at least 50% in their 10 years. Okay, at least 50%. When an analysis is conducted, if there is a probability that in the 10 years, at least 50% of these animals are going to wipe away, are going to face extinction, then they are put in CR category. It is therefore considered to be facing extremely high risk of extinction in the wild. Clear? So if these conditions are satisfied, that animal or plant is actually put in critically endangered category. Then comes endangered category. Okay, here also there are certain criteria. Earlier it was 90% in critically endangered category. In endangered category, it is 70%. If there is a reduction in population in the past decade of over 70%, then it qualifies as endangered. Similarly, if the number of mature individuals are less than 250, they qualify as endangered. Similarly, when an analysis is conducted showing the probability of extinction in the wild is at least 20% within 20 years, then they are kept as endangered. Clear? So they are also considered at a very high risk of extinction in the wild. Then comes vulnerable. Okay, we are actually starting from the very highest level of threat to, we are going down to lower and lower levels of threat. So what is vulnerable? Vulnerable means, again, there are 4 criterions. First of all, reduction in population is greater than 50% over last 10 years. At least 10,000 mature individuals are there available. Probability of extinction is like 10% within 100 years. So they are facing, high risk. That's it. It's not very high risk or anything. Okay, here it is extremely high risk. Here it is very high risk. Here it is only high risk. Okay, so the threat is actually, getting lower and lower as we move into the lower categories. After vulnerable comes near threatened. Near threatened is when it has been evaluated against the criteria but does not qualify for any of the above criteria. Okay, but it is close to qualifying for or is likely to qualify for threatened category in the near future. Alright, it doesn't fit any of the above set criteria, but there is a very likely chance that it could fit in the threatened category. In such cases, they are known as near threatened. Then comes least concern. Least concern, again, same thing. It does not come under any of the above category. Widespread and abundant taxa are included in this category. Alright, so any species that doesn't fit any of the above category of critically endangered, endangered, vulnerable, or near threatened, all these are put under least concern. Clear? Then comes data deficient. This is not exactly a threat level. Alright, data deficient means we are not yet able to put a species into a particular category because we do not have adequate data to put that species in a category. We know that that species exists. Surveys are being conducted. We have not got back the correct results or anything yet. Once we get all the results based on surveys and all, then we will put that species into some category. Until then, they are data deficient. So this is not a threat category. Okay, the last threat category is least concern. So after data deficient, there is one more category, that is not evaluated. Not evaluated means that taxon is not yet evaluated. That's it. Okay, we have not started evaluating that taxon yet. We will do that some point of time, and then we will categorize it into something of the above set categories. Clear? So these are the broad classifications under IUCN conservation status. So what are they? Extinct, extinct in the wild, critically endangered, endangered, vulnerable, near threatened, least concern, data deficient, and not evaluated. Got it? Let's move on. Indian biodiversity, the diverse landscape. Okay, so up till now we have looked into the broader classifications, and we looked into biodiversity in a very, very broad sense. The theoretical aspects have been covered. Now let's come to the Indian context. So what is the condition in India? India is a mega diverse country, correct? Due to our geographical features and topography and favorable climatic conditions, huge diversity is there in India. Western Ghats and eastern Himalayan ranges are hotspots, biological hotspots in India. Correct? India is only 2.4% of the land area of the world, but it holds nearly 7% of the recorded species. It also is home for 18% of the human population. Correct. So from this itself, it's very clear that India is a mega diverse country. In terms of species richness, India ranks 7th in mammals, 9th in birds, and 5th in reptiles. Very attractive position based on species richness. We have a wide range of ecosystems, forests, grasslands, wetland, coastal region, marine ecosystem, desert. Okay, so we have all this in our country. But before going into specifics, let's start from the beginning. Okay, Indian biodiversity or the territory of India has 2 realms, 5 biomes, 10 biogeographic zones, and 25 biogeographic provinces. Okay, so what are these realms and biomes and biogeographic zones, etc., etc.? That's what we are going to see now. What are realms? Large spatial regions within which ecosystems share a broadly similar biota are known as realms. Okay, these are as large as continents, huge continents. Correct. So such huge areas where ecosystems, multiple ecosystems exist within that area, but these ecosystems share some, broadly similar biota. If that's the case, then these regions are known as realms. There are actually 8 terrestrial biogeographic realms in the world, and these are given here. Okay, you can read them. There are 8 of them, but in India, we can only see 2 of them. One is in the Himalayan region, that is a Palearctic realm, and the rest of the subcontinent is the Malayan realm. Okay, only 2 realms are seen in India, Palearctic realm and Malayan realm. Understood? Next comes biomes. India is divided into 5 biomes. I know that you already know what a biome is because I have taken that in our second lecture, I think. Okay, so based on plants and animals, etc., living in a particular area based on climatic patterns, Indian biome is we can see 5 different types of biomes in India: tropical humid forests, tropical dry or deciduous forests, warm deserts and semi-deserts, coniferous forests, alpine meadows. We have looked into all of them in our previous classes, so I am not going to repeat any of it. I think you already know what these are. Otherwise, please watch the previous videos and you can understand what these are. Okay, so these are the 5 different biomes that we can see in India. Now coming to biogeographic zones. I told you there are 10 biogeographic zones in India. So this is a classification based on geographical distribution of plants and animals. Okay, based on what kind of animal or plant is seen in a particular area, we can broadly classify the Indian territory into 10 parts. Starting with Trans-Himalayas, where you can, which is basically in the Tibetan Plateau and, high altitude cold desert like Ladakh, Spiti Valley, etc., etc. Himalayas. Himalayas means that entire mountain range of Himalayas. Okay, which will comprise about 7.2% of country's landmass. Desert. You know what a desert is? The extremely arid region. Gujarat, Rajasthan, etc., etc. Semi-arid region. The zone between desert and the Deccan Plateau, including the Aravalli Hills. This is the semi-arid region which occupies 15.6% of country's landmass. You don't have to study these statistics. Just understand that there are 10 biogeographic zones, and this categorization is based on the geographic distribution of plants and animals. Okay, then Western Ghats, one of the most abundant species-rich areas in the world. Okay, the Western Ghats. Basically, the hills and the plains running along the western coastline south of Tapti River. Okay, covering an extremely diverse range of biotic provinces having 5.8% of country's landmass. Deccan Peninsula. In the peninsular area, we have this Deccan Plateau, that region. Okay, then Gangetic Plains, obviously. Northeastern India, huge diversity there also. Islands, Lakshadweep, Andaman Nicobar. Okay, and coast, the entire coastal region of India, both the eastern and the Coromandel coast. Sorry, Coromandel coast and the Konkan, the western coasts. Alright, so all these together forms the 10 biogeographical zones of Indian subcontinent. Okay, very easy to remember, nothing high funda or anything. Just think about India and all these terms will automatically come to your mind. Now, the next classification is biogeographic provinces, and there are 25 of them. Don't worry, I am not going to put it in. Just understand that there are 25 biogeographic provinces in India. Okay, sorry, provinces, not zones. All right, so what exactly is this biogeographic province? This is again a classification based on ecosystematic or biotic subdivision of realms. Okay, so this classification was actually done by Rogers and Panwar in 1988, where they divided the entire India into 10 biogeographic zones, as we mentioned earlier, which was further divided by them into 25 biogeographic provinces. Okay, so this classification was started in 1988. But again, understand that this is again a subdivision of the biogeographic zones based on some more factors to make it much more specific. It's not too much important for us. For example, factors like altitude, moisture, topography, rainfall, etc. etc. So by bringing in these factors to the earlier said biogeographic zones, we can actually categorize, subdivide them into even more numbers. Okay, and we have managed to divide them into 25 different provinces. And actually this is, this categorization is again used for protecting wildlife in India. So biogeographic zones were used as a basis for planning wildlife protection in India. Not provinces, zones. I told you 10 biogeographic zones are there. This is the basis in which wildlife protection is planned in India. And this specificity, the biogeographic provinces adds in much more, more data and more know-how into the zonal evaluation. Okay, not that much important, just for your information, that's all. Now, fauna and flora, animals and plants. So we are going to see what are the different types of fauna and what are the different types of flora. This is something that you have studied in your biology in your high school. Okay, so fauna, which means animals, are broadly classified as vertebrates and invertebrates. Correct? Vertebrates are those animals which have a backbone and a spinal column. And these are the most advanced form of organisms on planet Earth. Including human beings, we are all vertebrates. We have a spinal cord, correct, or a spinal column, whatever it is. If an animal have a spinal cord or a backbone, then that organism is classified as a vertebrate. This section of vertebrates is divided into multiple subcategories, starting with fishes. So what are fishes? You all know what are fishes, but what are their characteristics? They are cold-blooded organisms, which means they are not too much adaptive to changes in temperature. I mentioned this when I taught you aquatic ecosystem. Correct? Because the water has a very high specific heat capacity, its change in temperature is very gradual. It doesn't change immediately. Correct? So aquatic organisms have very less adaptability capability. Okay, they do not adapt to changes in temperature very quickly, unlike terrestrial organisms. So fishes are cold-blooded organisms, which means they are not very good in adaptation based on temperature. They breathe using gills. They do not have lungs or anything. They breathe through gills. They have scales and fins. They lay eggs. So these are the characteristics of fishes. Amphibians. What are amphibians? Those organisms that are capable of living both in water and in land. For example, frog. Correct. Some snakes are there. Correct. So these are some turtles are there. These are amphibians. Amphibians are also cold-blooded. They live both on land and water. They have webbed feet. Correct. They have feet because they have to walk on the land. They have webbed feet because that enables them to swim on water also. They have both lungs and gills. Yes, they have to breathe inside water and outside water. So they have both these capabilities. Their skin is moist and smooth. Yeah, think about a frog. Okay, very smooth, very moist skin. They are four-legged. Sometimes they do not have any leg, but most often they are four-legged organisms and they lay eggs. Most of them. There are exceptions, obviously. Okay, but most of them lays eggs. Then comes reptiles. What are reptiles? Reptiles includes all the organisms that crawl. Correct? Lizards, snakes. All these comes under reptiles. They are also cold-blooded. They have scales. You know that snakes and all shed their scales, correct? The exoskeleton or, some cases that otherwise scales. They have very dry skin. Yes. They lay eggs. Yes. Ear holes instead of ears. Also correct. They have ear holes. They do not have ears as human beings. 4 legs or no legs. Lizards and all have 4 legs, but snakes have no legs. Correct. Then aves. What are aves? Aves are basically the avian category or birds. Birds are warm-blooded organisms. They are highly adaptable to changes in temperature. Okay, they can sometimes, if it is in case temperature variation is very huge, they will simply migrate. But they are capable of quick atmospheric changes, to adapt to quick atmospheric changes. All right, so they are warm-blooded. They have feathers and wings. They also lay eggs, most of them. They have 2 legs. Okay, birds are 2-legged. They have ear holes instead of ears. You might have noticed all these things by simply looking into a bird. Mammals, human beings. Okay, we are all a part of this species, this particular category, mammals. So they are warm-blooded. We are capable of adapting towards our environment. Hair or fur is present. Yeah, human beings have hair. There are mammals with fur also. Correct. Cat, some dogs, okay, etc. etc. They give birth to their young ones. Most of them, okay, they give birth, not lay egg. There are mammals that lays eggs that are very rare, but most mammals give birth to their young ones. Mammal mother nurse their young one with their milk. Correct. They have lungs. Yes. Mammals live on land, have 4 legs or 2 legs and 2 arms. Correct. Tiger, lion, all these have 4 legs. Human beings have 2 legs and 2 arms. Chimpanzees have 2 legs and 2 arms. Correct. Then ears that stick out. Obviously, we have pronounced ears. So these are the subcategories of vertebrates. Then comes invertebrates. What are invertebrates? Invertebrates are those organisms that have, those animals that have no backbone. Alright, more than 98% animal species in the world are invertebrates. More than 98% of species, animal species, are actually invertebrates. They do not have an internal skeleton made of bone. Instead, they have what is called a hydrostatic skeleton or a hard outer shell. One of these are present. Either a hydrostatic skeleton, it's not a well-developed skeleton or anything. It just gives them some stability, a very good shape to their body. Okay, sometimes, not always. Then, or a hard outer shell. One of these are there in invertebrates. And their subcategorization is as follows. First of all, annelids. Annelids are, think about the worms and all. Okay, like example, tapeworm, etc. etc. These comes under annelids. Their body is divided into segments. Okay, you have seen some tapeworms and all, right? They will look something like this, and their body is divided into multiple segments. Okay, well-developed internal organs. Yes, they might be very small, but their internal organs are very well developed. Don't have any limbs. Obviously, they do not have any limbs. Example, earthworm, leeches, roundworm, etc. etc. Then comes mollusks. They are soft, skin-like organ covered with a hard outer shell. Okay, they have a very soft skin-like organ that is covered with a very hard outer shell. Have you seen this, mussel and oyster and all, squid, octopus, etc. etc. Okay, so some of them live on land and some of them live on water. We can snails and slug. These are things that we see on land. Oyster, mussel, etc. we see on water bodies. So these are mollusks. Echinoderms. Echinoderms are basically marine animals that live in ocean. Okay, arms or spines that radiate from the center of the body. So again, just think about it. What is the example? Sea star. From the center of the body, their arms and spines. Arms and spines will radiate from that center area. So you have seen the starfish and all, right? Sea star, sea urchin, sea dollar, sea cucumber, etc. All this comes under echinoderms. Protozoa. Single-celled, smallest of all animals. They breathe, move, and reproduce like multi-celled animals. They have only one cell, and these are the the smallest of all animals. Protozoa. They have all body functions. They actually breathe, move, reproduce. They do all these things just like multi-celled animals. However, they only have single cell. Example: amoeba, flagella, etc., etc. Okay, then comes arthropods, the final categorization. Arthropods are those animals which have limbs with joints, also have an exoskeleton. This includes crustaceans, insects, and arachnids. Okay, so arthropoda is divided. This is a phylum. Okay, so phylum arthropoda is divided into crustaceans, insects, and arachnids. So, what are crustaceans? Crustaceans are those that live mostly underwater. They have hard external shell. Example: crab, lobster, barnacle. So, whenever you study a category, it is better that you study based with help of examples. So, when you say crustaceans, the first picture that should come to your mind is a crab or a lobster. Then you can write the properties on your own. The characteristics and all you can generate from that. Okay, otherwise you might get confused and you won't be able to correctly memorize which one has what characteristics. So remember the name of the phylum and then remember some examples in that category. That is how you study this portion. Okay, now insects. They have exoskeleton that covers their entire body. They have 3 body parts and 6 legs and an antenna. Correct. 3 body parts are there. You have seen a butterfly, correct? 3 body parts, some cases wings and all, and then 2 antennas will be there. They are 6-legged organisms. All right, that is insects. Finally, arachnids. Arachnids does not have this antenna. They have 2 body parts and 4 pairs of legs. 2 body parts and 4 pairs of legs. Best example, spider. Got it? Spider, scorpion, ticks, mites, all this comes under arachnids. Clear? So these are the broad classifications of invertebrates. And so generally, the entire fauna is classified into vertebrates and invertebrates. Vertebrates are classified into subcategories like fishes, amphibians, reptiles, aves, and mammals. Invertebrates are classified into annelids, mollusks, echinoderms, protozoa, and arachnida. And arachnids are again subcategorized as crustaceans, insects, and this is arthropoda. And arthropods are classified into crustaceans, insects, and arachnids. Okay. Now to the last topic for the day, floral diversity. So just like the faunal diversity that we just saw, plant kingdom is also divided into certain subcategories. Okay, so in the world, based on plant diversity, India ranks 10th in the world and 4th in Asia. Okay, India actually represents nearly 11% of the world's known floral diversity. Clear? So what are the subcategorization of flora? Kingdom flora. First of all, algae or algae. Okay, however you want to pronounce it. So algae is basically green, non-differentiated plants. What does this mean, non-differentiated plants? It simply means that there is no differentiation between organs. Okay, no clear root or stem or leaf or anything. It's very unclear. It's all together. But they do have chlorophyll, which obviously means they have photosynthesis. They can do photosynthesis. They are usually seen in water or moist surfaces. Correct? If they are seen in fresh water, they are usually green in color or blue-green in color. But if they are seen in marine area, they are either red or brown in color. We have studied this already. We have studied about red tide and brown tide, etc., etc. We studied about algal bloom. Okay, so that is algae. Fungi. What is fungi? Fungi or fungi, however you want to pronounce it. What is fungi? They are non-green, non-differentiated plants. They are non-green, so obviously they have no chlorophyll, which means they cannot do photosynthesis of their own, which means they have to depend on some other organism. Correct? So they grow on the dead, rotten organic matter such as saprophytes or live as parasites. Example, mold and mushroom. Okay, so since they are not producers, they have to depend on something else for nourishment. Okay, that is fungi. Then comes bacteria. Bacteria also have no chlorophyll. They are non-chlorophyllous microorganisms which lead saprophytic or parasitic existence. Yes, if that organism is not a producer, then they have to depend on something. So obviously they are either parasitic or saprophytic, something like that, or predatorial. Okay, so many of them are pathogenic. Saprophytic bacteria are rather beneficial. Okay, they have this particular advantage. They are rather beneficial because they help to you know uh, enhance the nutrient cycles by decomposing the dead and decayed, and leaching back the nutrients into the soil. Some of these bacteria help in fixing the nitrogen into the soil, etc., etc. So a very useful kind of organism, bacteria. Okay, lichens. Lichen is basically a combination of algae and fungi. Sorry, algae and fungus. Okay, a symbiotic arrangement between algae and fungus is known as lichen. They are grayish green plants which grow on rocks, tree trunks, dead wood, etc., etc. They are most commonly found in wetlands and very rarely in rivers, and are not found in groundwater. Okay, so that symbiotic existence between algae and fungi is known as lichen. Then comes bryophytes. What are bryophytes? The plant body is differentiated into small stem and simple leaves, but no true roots are available. Okay, small stem is there, simple leaves are there, but there is no true root present. So they usually grow in moist places. For example, mosses, liverworts, etc., etc. Okay, think about it. Mosses. Okay, you can see that green, moss that's spread in your house and all. Correct. If you look into very old houses and all, if the area is very moist, you can see a green coloration. This is basically mosses, which is actually a bryophyte. Okay, so they have clear leaves and all, small leaves, small stem, but no actual root. Okay, then comes pteridophytes. Pteridophytes are well differentiated plant bodies consisting of roots, stems, and leaves. They possess vascular bundles also. Vascular bundles means this stigma, style, ovary, okay, and rhizome, gynoecium. You might have studied all these things in your biology. So if you have all that, vascular bundles include xylem, phloem, etc., etc. Okay, so if a plant possesses these kinds of nourishment pathways, xylem, phloem, etc., etc., then such plants comes under pteridophytes. Most of them are terrestrial plants flourishing well in moist and shady places, and some of them are aquatic. Okay, example, club mosses, horsetails, ferns, etc., etc. Then comes the most important categories of plants, gymnosperms and angiosperms. This is the last slide. What are gymnosperms and what are angiosperms? These are the most developed species, most developed types of flora. Gymnosperms. What does gymno mean? Gymno means naked. Sperm means seed. So basically they are naked seeded plants, which means their seeds are visible. It's not covered or anything. It's naked seeds. Very simple flowers without accessory whorls, and stamens and carpels remain aggregated in cones. So what is a carpel? Carpel is the stigma, style, ovary. These three things together form the carpel. So if that is absent, then such group is known as gymnosperm. You can see the image here. Look at the second image. This is the gymnosperm. You can see there is no stigma or style or ovary or anything. Correct. No stamen. No. So nothing like that. Ovules are present on the surface of the carpel and are directly pollinated by pollen grains. You can see that here. You can see the seed coat. You can see the food supply and embryo, etc., etc. But you can clearly see that there is a clear absence of any kind of flowering things. So gymnosperms are in essence non-flowering plants. Okay, they do not have anything like ovary, style, stigma, etc., etc. So obviously they are not able to produce fruit. There is no fruit. I mean, if you have all these things, can you have a fruit, correct? If there is no ovary, then you can't bear fruits. So examples: cycas, pinus, netem, pine, etc., etc. Pine is the largest family. Alright, so non-flowering plants are known as gymnosperms, or say in either non-flowering or very simple flowers, whatever. Final, last categorization, angiosperms. These are the flowering plants. They are closed seeded plants, very highly developed, bears flower, having conspicuous accessory and essential oils. Carpel have the ovary, style and stigma. You can see the flower, correct? Here you can see the stigma, style and ovary. Stigma is the top portion here. Style is this tubular region. Ovary is the lowermost part, which contains ovules. Okay, so with the stimulus of fertilization, the ovary usually develops into the fruit and ovules into the seed. So when, from the anther, when the pollen grains are deposited by the agents of pollination into the stigma, from the stigma, it goes down through the style and enters the ovary. In the ovary, fertilization will happen and this flower will become a fruit. And when that happens, this ovary becomes the fruit and the ovules becomes the seed. That is how plants grow. Example, everything, literally most of the plants like mango tree, okay, papaya, etc., etc. All flowering plants comes under angiosperms. Okay, and they are capable of producing fruits and seeds. So by that, we come to the end of that particular section of biodiversity. Today we have looked into two major areas. First of all, we studied the entire biodiversity in the theoretical format, and then we looked into the Indian picture of biodiversity. Okay, we also looked into the different kinds of phylums and families and kingdoms, etc., etc. Flora, fauna, etc. Those are the kingdoms. Then we have looked into the different phylums, arthropoda, etc., etc., mollusca, etc., etc. Both for animals as well as plants. And finally, we have looked into what are flowering plants and non-flowering plants, and we looked into some examples also. Okay, so these are the basics of biodiversity. Please do look into them. And that is it. As for now, I am stopping today. Now I am stopping it here because otherwise too much information will saturate you and it's not good for anybody. Okay, so in the next class tomorrow, we will look into the next topic where we will be seeing some more specific areas in biodiversity, very important for UPSC. Okay, so please make sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel and share with your friends. I will upload the entire class note in the Telegram channel. The link is given here. So please go there to download the notes. So until tomorrow, this is bye and good night.